Good evening, everybody. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Somerville Planning Board at 6:03 p.m. on the 24th of June. I'm Mike Capuano. I'm the chairman. With me tonight is Amelia Aboff, Jahan Habib, and Erin Gino. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 28th, 2021 COVID-19 Order Number 69, providing for an extension of the suspension of certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 18, as well as Mayor Curtatoni's declaration of emergency dated March 15th, 2020. This meeting of the Planning Board will be conducted via remote participation. We have one item on the agenda this evening. It is a continuation from a hearing that we have previously opened, which is 5 Middlesex Avenue, Planning and Zoning 20-015. And that is the case that we will open now. So it's my understanding that we have a presentation perhaps by staff and maybe some discussion by the applicant. So if I could have whoever would like to present first. I don't know if Sarah's on and wants to present the proposed amended conditions, or if the applicant would like to be on to discuss them first.
Good evening, all. Yeah, I don't mind what order whatever you prefer to do things in. If you want to.
Sarah, since you're unmuted and on camera, can we have you first, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, so some of these are fairly minor, and we've been working with the applicant and the mobility team mostly to get. So I'll give you a little bit of background. The new conditions were added in as much as trying to get parity between the new developments, as this project is under a PUD under an old ordinance and an old sort of a completely different neighborhood plan that, as you guys know, we're redoing. We're trying to make sure that we're getting, as I said, parity between a lot of the new developments. So I think you'll see some of that in this language. And I hadn't talked about the conditions that we had added previously to get to that point. But most of the ones under the conditions under 30 are the ones that we're talking about. So the way things have been written is actually condition number 30 itself will be struck because it's being replaced with a number of other, sorry, not 30, 30A, being replaced with a number of other more detailed decisions that elaborate on what was in the PUD and what is in the building mobility management plan. So the easy thing is from conditions, so a strike 30A, 30B and 30C have just a simple added language that for the lease agreements, they may provide excerpted provisions from. So not necessarily, because a lot of times leases have, sort of proprietary or confidential language in them. The intent is they can, as long as they show us that these things are happening. 30D, we changed the percentage because this is a particularly large garage. We changed the percentage of carpool and vanpool spaces to 2%. So that ends up being, I think, about, I lost my notes. I want to say it's, I think it's 30 something spaces, which is still a lot of vanpool and carpool spaces. The next one is 30E. That condition will be struck also because that language about reserved spaces also comes in later in condition 33. So that's just trying to get to a redundancy. 30F, the language primarily stays the same. What we've changed is rather than a percentage, Mobility thought it was much clearer to have an actual number of garage spaces listed. So instead of the 2.5%, we have specified 8 vehicle spaces that must be available for car share vehicles. The 30I, regarding the electric vehicles, there have been we've added some clarifying language, just to, some of it is terminology, in as much as going from the including provisions for raceway, which sort of felt a little vague, instead of identification of future conduit paths. So the idea of where, for the EV ready spaces, showing, they need to show us where the electrical supply will be coming from. Along that line as well, the idea that being able to show us the potential additional transformer capacity that might be needed. That gives flexibility. So what we know now as level 2 chargers might not be the technology at the time. We know there's a level 3 charger. Those are the fast chargers. So whatever the current technology is, we're trying to make sure that the capacity can be added to the transformers. The big changes are in 33A and B. And some of it has to do with just the clarification of the availability of parking passes, so that comes to emphasizing the unbundling of the parking from the actual office space. And so that the idea, making sure that there is clarity on, while the tenant employees might have first choice of purchasing, it is still the tenant employees that must purchase, not the companies that purchase said passes, to make sure that it's, sort of the spaces that are not used by the employees could be potentially available to public in the future. So that was trying to clarify that language. I'm going to have to read you the one for 33B, just because that was completely reworded. And this has to do with the reserved parking spaces. The numbers don't change, but we think there's a clarification here. So the proposed language is up to 5% of the total structured parking spaces may be provided as reserved parking spaces, subject to a 200% market rate price premium. Car share and van pool or carpool spaces are not reserved parking spaces. The maximum number of reserved parking spaces may be exceeded upon the payment of a fee in accordance with the additional reserved parking space fee schedule established in the rules of policy and procedure of the Somerville Planning Board. Applicant will submit details on all parking rates offered in the commercial parking facility with annual mobility management reporting. Just for a clarification, the idea being that to disincentivize the idea of the reserved parking space, which in the ordinance, the simple way to think about it is the reserved parking space is CEO only type spaces. So to sort of reduce the number of, only X may park here spaces. That's why there's the price premium. And I will also say, keep in mind that all of these tied to participation in the Transportation Management Association, Assembly Connect. So all of that is still in place, and that will help with which is why the reporting makes a big difference, and sort of there'll be the balancing over the entire neighborhood. The other one that we realized was a problem with the wording and not terribly clear, and was potentially limiting us to only a 5-foot sidewalk in the way it was worded, is condition 38. So the new proposed language for that is all new sidewalks, street trees, and sidewalk furnishings must be compliant with the specifications of all relevant city departments. To ensure a 5-foot accessible route is maintained for each sidewalk, a pedestrian access easement must be provided in perpetuity by a covenant or other deed restriction for the full area of the proposed sidewalks. Final easement language must be approved by the city solicitor. So it was in our previous version, we might have only been able to maintain the 5-foot sidewalk. And so this, at least in areas where the sidewalk is wider and we do want pedestrian streets to have minimum of 12 feet, then the public access, the pedestrian access easement will provide that for us. So a lot of words, but I think this actually these will help clarify as we move forward.
Sarah, thank you. I think that the proposed amended conditions, I think from how you described them, as well as read some of them, go towards our goal for mobility management for the Assembly Square as a whole, because that wasn't subject to obviously the new neighborhood plan and the new requirements. And I think those all seem reasonable. Like, no questions about some of that. And we had this hearing, and I think they answered the questions that I had. But I'd like to, I don't know if you have, or anybody else on the board has questions for Sarah right now.
Thank you.
Okay. I would like, Sarah, unless you have anything else for us right now, I'd like to invite the applicant to say anything that they'd like to address the new conditions and anything else that they want to present to the board.
Mrs. Sarah, this is Rebecca speaking. I am going to unmute Al Zeno and Ed McDonald. And I can also unmute anyone else who wishes to speak. If all you need to do is utilize the raise hand feature, and I will recognize you and unmute your microphone.
And for anybody on the applicant's team that's going to be speaking, if you could just introduce yourself for the record.
Hi, this is Ed McDonald. I'm Senior Director of Development at Biomed Realty.
If you want to make a presentation or address any of the proposed condition amendments and additions, you can definitely do that.
Okay. No, I think we had a conversation offline, and we're Sal and myself are feel comfortable. We've arrived at a good place for these conditions, and we appreciate the time that Sarah and her team and Rebecca and Mobility made for us this afternoon to discuss these. So I think the clarification on reserved spaces was especially helpful. The fact that we kind of understood it to be something else other than kind of reserved spaces for a specific individual that were essentially taken out of circulation in the garage. So I think that's helpful, and the distinction between that and monthly passes for, let's say, tenants our greatest concern was really that we be able to offer the spaces in the garage for our tenants at market rate, which is fine. And we got to some clarity, additional clarity on that through the conversation this afternoon. So we really appreciate that. And I think that some of the adjustments that were made in terms of the percentages on the ride share and also the car share were really helpful. This is this was also something that we kind of thought was a little bit excessive in terms of the percentages and the number of spaces that it translated into. But I think that where we've landed with the 2% for the carpools and van pools and at least 8 spaces for the car share service, like a Zip car service, I think are appropriate here. So really appreciate that. I guess I wanted to kind of just get clarification on condition 30I, and this is really more of a question for Sarah. The 12% versus the 12.5% on the EV charging stations. I assume that means that we will meet the 12.5%. So the 156 spaces that we currently have reserved will need to be increased to 160. So additional 4 spaces, which we shouldn't have a problem complying with, but just wanted that clarity.
Through the chair, yes, the 12.5% is the, yes, 12.5% is the number in the condition.
Okay. Yeah, and we have spoken with you previously about the fact that we will have the infrastructure in the garage necessary to, provide additional spaces if demand warrants. So that should not be an issue for us.
Thank you very much, Ed. Did anybody else want to what I'd like to do now then, if there's no further presentation by the applicant or by staff, because there was new information that was presented to the planning board, as we changed our protocols a few years ago, that where there's new information presented to the planning board, we open the public hearing. So because we did receive new information by the way of amended and conditions, I would like to open up this hearing for public testimony for anybody that wants to speak in support of the application. If you'd like to do so, please hit the raised hand button and I will call on you. Scroll one more time up. Seeing none, I'm going to close that section of the public hearing, and I'm going to open it up to anyone that wants to speak in opposition to the application or otherwise express concern. Please hit the raised hand button if you'd like to testify. Okay. Seeing none, I'm going to close that section of the hearing and open it up to discussion by members of the planning board. So does anyone have any comments or questions that they'd like to raise about this application? Thank you also. I just want to say thank you to the applicant and obviously thank you to staff by giving this board an application that I think fits the bill within exactly what we were hoping to see in this first kind of phased PUD and area of Assembly Square. I think it's going to be a great addition. I think it will work well within the greater Assembly Square area and will be a very good addition to the city. So the board has seen the proposed conditions We have also heard a discussion and explanation from staff on the amendments to those conditions. So when I move, I will see if the board wants to accept those staff proposed conditions. I also want to know if anybody has any additional proposed conditions that they would like to add. I do not. No. Okay. Seeing then, following public testimony and review of the submitted materials and deliberation of the required considerations outlined by the zoning ordinance, I move to approve with conditions as amended the request for a waiver from the maximum height, seconded by Amelia. Roll call vote. The chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
We have a unanimous vote in support of that. And following public testimony, review of the submitted materials and deliberation of the required considerations outlined by the zoning ordinance, I move to approve with the conditions as amended, the application for the special permit and site plan approval, seconded by Amelia. The chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
We have a unanimous vote, and I want to say thank you and congratulations to the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Have a nice night. We'll hopefully see you again soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. There being no further business before the planning board this evening, does anybody have anything to add for the good of those of us around? Seeing none, the chair moves to adjourn. And by the way, I'm taking a quick look at my calendar for the next meeting. I think it is in July.
Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca speaking. It will be the 15th.
The 15th of July. The chair moves to adjourn and eat dinner, seconded by Amelia. The chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
Thank you all very much. Have a good night, and I'll see you in a few weeks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Have a happy 4th of July, all.
You too.
You too. Thank you.
Good night.